Some brands offer you low finance, or cashback, or servicing.
Renault don't do ors. We do ands. The Renault Kadjar with 1.91% APR and €1,000 cashback and 3 years servicing, saving you thousands. Renault, the brand with the ands. Visit your local Renault dealer. Finance is made under a hire purchase agreement. Terms and conditions apply. Deposit required. Subject to lending criteria. See Renault.ie.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z and Corey Clubb, the podcast you're looking for. This is, yes.
For an entire generation, people have experienced Star Wars the only way it's been possible, on the TV screen. But if you've only seen it this way, you haven't seen it at all.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
We've been waiting for you.
The force is strong here, even stronger than the coffee.
Welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. Here are your hosts, Dan Z and Corey Clubb.
Hello, this is Dan Z, and welcome to show number 31 of Coffee with Kenobi, a Star Wars podcast that analyzes our favorite saga in a whole new way. With me is my good friend and co-host, Corey Clubb.
Hello, everybody. Be sure to check out our bloggers for the latest in Star Wars analysis and reflection. This month, Scott Murray and Ajua Adama join our blogging family. We're happy to have them. Scott looks at why the Ewoks and Jar Jar belong, and Ajua starts to break down the Mortis trilogy from the Clone Wars. Be sure to check them out and let us know what you think.
In today's show, the previously mentioned Scott Murray joins us to discuss Star Wars: A New Hope. We continue our journey of looking at the 6 existing films in reverse order. We also announce exciting news for Coffee with Kenobi and the Celebration Anaheim Podcasting stage, as well as look at the latest 6-inch Black Series figures and have the latest Espresso Shot with the Bearded Trio featuring Rob Wainfur. We will also introduce our topic for show number 32.
And now, let's see what's brewing in the Star Wars universe this week.
Oh, wait. This is interesting.
You found something.
I'm about to let everyone in on the secret.
Our first bit of news here is obviously some huge news for Celebration Anaheim coming this April. We're very excited. Dan and I have our plane tickets. We got our press passes, and we're ready. We're packing our bags and getting excited. But we got notification that we have been officially announced to be doing a podcast stage event. This is a first time for us. We're very excited. We're humbled to be part of the show and want to spread the word for everybody.
Well said, as always, my friend. This is wonderful. Months ago, they had the opportunity where, for the first time ever, Star Wars Celebration is going to have a podcasting stage. And I'm going to assume, I have no inside knowledge on this, but I'm going to assume that there were so many podcasts that said, hey, I like to do a panel. I like to do a fan panel. And they probably thought, well, why don't we just do a big podcasting area? And this is going to be one of my favorite parts, and not only just having us on, which is such a wonderful thrill. I mean, truly, we are incredibly blessed, and we are so grateful that this is happening. But we also get to see our favorite podcasters live doing their shows, and this is awesome.
Yeah.
And, it's exciting. I guess it's nerve-wracking, but it's really more fun than anything.
Exactly. Yeah, you said just right. I mean, tons of people will be there. All our friends will be there. I'm excited just to interact with everybody. Yeah, and shake their hands. We've talked about numerous times having folks on, guests on, fans on, and there we go. We get a chance to kind of group all in one place and enjoy just talking about Star Wars. I mean, I know you and I are kind of racking our brains what we want to do and kind of how we want to set up everything, but we're excited to just meet everybody and interact.
And we have the new information that we do have so far, and hopefully by now, via Twitter or Facebook or our website, coffeewithkenobi.com. You saw the awesome artwork that Corey made. It's great. I was so stoked.
The travel mug, yes.
Yes, it's got the travel mug. It says Coffee with Kenobi Live, and it's the podcast stage at the Anaheim Convention Center. It's on the second floor. It's room 208AB. That's where the podcasting stage is going to be. So whether you come to see us or any other podcast, that's where it'll be, 208AB. And for us, it's Thursday, April 16th from 11:30 a.m. 12:30 p.m. Every podcast gets an hour slot, and you pretty much get to do your show.
Yeah, we plan to fill it with awesome. So
yes, we do. And Corey, at this point, what do we want to say, or what can we say about what fans can expect if they come and share an hour with us?
That's funny because we kind of talked with some folks online, just kind of joking back and forth, and I think the biggest thing we would love to do is serve a coffee.
I know.
I think that'd be so cool. I don't know how we do it, if we can make it work.
Everybody can just bring a crap load of Keurigs.
There you go. Yeah, bring your own Keurig cup and I don't know, pass out some coffee and just enjoy, obviously good conversation about Star Wars, about a celebration, what we've experienced so far, how folks kind of, have met each other, interactions online. Yeah, it's going to be a blast. I'm looking forward to it.
And really, it's so new. I mean, literally, on Saturday night, I was getting some stuff ready to release our most recent Rebels reactions. And then I got a bunch of tabs open, and all of a sudden Yahoo pops up, and it says, I have an email. I'm like, oh, okay. And it says, Mary Franklin, Star Wars Celebration Podcasting Stage. And I was like, oh my God. And it had an exclamation point behind it. So I opened it, forwarded it to you right away.
Yeah.
And wow, and then the wheels start to spin, as you said. And at this point, we're still very much debating, different things we want to do. And we're certainly open to suggestions that anyone might have as far as topics, maybe guests you'd like to see up there with us.
Sure,
we know who we'd like to see, Dave Filoni and George Lucas.
Yes, please.
But in the very probable event that is not going to happen,
we'll take Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill, sure.
Yes, we will. Of course we will. It's very giving of you to have such a gracious demeanor about this.
We'll take anybody, really.
We're just excited to be able to share a cup of coffee with so many people live, and we've never really done a live show, certainly on this magnitude. So it's great. Again, what a tremendous blessing. We're very thankful and excited. We're going to have some giveaways. We like to involve listeners and people who come and listen to us. We hope to have a guest or two. As Corey said, the wheels are still very much turning and in motion, and we can't wait to see what Celebration is going to bring. So be sure to check us out at April 16th from 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m., 208 AB. Much more to come. For our second news story, we have a pretty special guest here in the Coffee with Kenobi studios. I've got my good friend here, Scott Nafziger. Scott, welcome to Coffee with Kenobi.
Thank you, Dan. Very excited to be here in Coffee with Kenobi Studios. Very nice what you've done.
Oh, thank you. It's very spacious, isn't it? So, Corey, this is fun. Scott's been listening to our show from the beginning, and it's always fun to get his feedback. So he was kind enough to stop by. And this is a good news story to get everybody's opinion on. There's been a lot of rumblings about George Lucas and his opinions on The Force Awakens and how much involvement he has in the films and that kind of stuff. So what we see here is he finally saw the trailer for The Force Awakens. And Corey, what did he say?
Yeah, it was very kind of plain, and he kind of just made a couple sentence statement. And he says, I saw the trailer. I saw it in a theater because I don't watch much movies online. And then when asked if he liked it or not, he smiled and said, yeah, it was intriguing. So, what's the takeaway from this? It seems like George, I've made this analogy before where he kind of has set his kids off to college, and he's kind of, backed off. He's, in George mode and doing his own thing. And I think that's great too. As college kids are off playing and looking to get their degree and, doing their thing. And he's kind of watching from afar and he's like, oh yeah, I saw him go off to college and it was good times, I don't think he's going to sit down and say it was awesome or it was really bad, because it's in his medium and he's an artist, obviously. So he's like, it's almost like, I'm sure he has an opinion, but it's like, I'm not going to sit here and give you the answer you want to hear or not want to hear, because I'm going to give him respect for what it is. It's a medium that, it's my kids, my baby, that somebody else is obviously, doing a good job with and doing their own, I don't know how to, I don't know, maybe I'm going too far in this, but it seems like he kind of gives a non-answer where it's kind of, I'm aware of it. I know what's going on. I've seen it. And I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see where it goes, and he's happy for it. I think it seems like it's a very positive statement in some respects. So it went too far with that. Did I go too far?
No, not at all. Scott, what do you think? How would you describe your Star Wars fandom anyway?
From 1 to 10?
Yes.
10 being the highest?
Yes.
1 being the lowest?
Yes.
I'd say I'm about a 3.
3, okay.
But I do listen to this podcast, so that's how I know how stuff's going on.
Which makes you a 10 for us.
Yes. 11.
Oh, wow. This one goes to 11. So what do you think, Scott, when you hear about something like this? Corey, before we started taping, Corey said, is this really even news? What do you think?
Not really, and I think he probably wants to keep it that way. I think people listen to what he says so much that I think he's trying to help J.J. Abrams be his own man and create his own movie and try to stay out of the way. It's kind of an analogy of the president. Your former presidents usually don't comment on your current ones. It's just respect.
Oh, I like that. That's very
great.
Good. Yeah, that's an intriguing. Speaking of intriguing, that's an intriguing way to look at it. And personally, this isn't really any different from what we've seen from George Lucas anyway.
Right.
He's always been a man of few words. We know his directing style. We know from Chris Taylor's book, How Star Wars Conquered the Universe, that George is a visual guy. He's not a word guy. He wasn't as wrapped up in the dialogue in the films. He cared more about how it looked, the visuals, and it was an intriguing trailer. It was wonderful. I think this is cool. I mean, it's really not news, but for Star Wars fans, it's just something to feel like, okay, George is still around a little bit. Again, the irony is not lost on me. So many people were ready to send him out of Hollywood because they were upset by the prequels. And now a lot of people want him back. I've always embraced George Lucas, and I wish I could embrace him. Hey, how you doing, George? Give him a big hug. He's the reason all this is on and why we're talking about this. Maybe more intriguing to me are some of the rumblings after this had come out that said that The Force Awakens is not George's treatment. It's nothing that he did. It's a whole new thing. How do you feel about that? That's probably a bigger issue, to be honest.
Yeah, it is, and I think he is kind of saying, I've stepped back, and if they don't use my stuff, they don't use my stuff. But it's nice to know that he had ideas in place. He had a blueprint for what he wanted to do. And what's to say they didn't look at it and pull ideas? It's crazy because, as a writer myself, it's almost like you always want to have, your work seen up on the screen or a different element or a different medium of some sort. And going in that you're not going to be making that film or making that, graphic novel or whatever it may be. So you have to kind of remove yourself from that part of it, and you want to sit back and go, oh, this is someone else's vision, in a sense. This is somebody else's way of doing it. We've seen that numerous times in film. Obviously, with all the comic book movies, you gotta remove yourself a little bit. You can't say, well, that costume's wrong because he didn't have the glove was red or blue or whatever. It's just a different way of looking at things. And when it comes to Star Wars, it is canon. This is the way it's going to be from now on. I think George is okay with that. I think he's just stating the obvious, where he's saying, I had some ideas, they didn't use them. That's just the way it is. It's it's a business.
And this is one of the things where, as the film comes out, we'll get more actual concrete evidence. I mean, look at the making of all the original Star Wars films that J.W. Rinsler made. The original George Lucas ideas for Return of the Jedi was that there were 2 Death Stars. Darth Vader had a castle. All this kind of stuff, and that didn't happen. And at the end, the Force Ghosts of Yoda and Obi-Wan were going to join in the fight. And none of those things happen. And may I say, thank goodness for that. And maybe I would have loved them when they came out when I was a little kid. Undoubtedly, I probably would have. But that's not what we get. This is where storytelling and collaboration comes into effect. The thing that makes me a little reticent, Star Wars is our modern mythology for Americans since 1977. And George Lucas has always been the one driving it. When the Clone Wars came out, George Lucas was with Dave Filoni in the pilot's chair. Dave was the director, the supervising director, and Lucas came up with the ideas for all these stories, and Dave took them and came up with his own ideas, and we got solid gold. Now we have the real notion that a new Star Wars film is not going to have anything to do with what George Lucas outlined. I find that hard to believe. His fingerprints are not going to be all over this film. That seems incredibly unlikely. Well, I can guarantee you more of his ideas are going to be in there than mine.
Well, here's the other thing. Here's the other thing, too. It's like you say he might not have much to do with it, but he has everything to do with it. He created all those characters. They're still there.
That's right.
They're still playing out their roles and being who they are. Mark Hamill's not going to play a totally different, Luke Skywalker.
No.
It's still there. He's still going to represent those memories and those characters from the original movies. So George Lucas is still in this whether he likes it or not.
Yeah, I mean, and I think he's loving this idea that he can just sit back. I don't think there's any sort of mysticism or, vagaries in his statement. He's happy. He's been saying forever he wanted to watch Star Wars as a fan, but he never got the chance to do it. And now he gets to. And as far as how much of his ideas are in this, time will tell. But as we've been saying, they're not going to completely steer away from that. He's such a powerful visionary in modern cinema, in American cinema, and in classic storytelling. The only thing that makes me a little bit nervous is when I think about Lord of the Rings. Tolkien did that. He wrote the books. He made the maps. He created these Germanic languages, and they were, of course, the things of legend. If someone came in later and said, "Hey, I'm going to do a story about the Lord of the Rings, like a prequel or something after that," I don't think that would sit well with me. But we're talking about a book as literature versus film lore. Look at the Marvel universe. Joss Whedon is directing the first and second Avengers, but that's it. There have been different directors for all these movies, but they're all tying in together. As long as there's some sort of a visionary that's taking it forward, it still makes me nervous because there's still that little kid in me that wishes George Lucas were doing it all. George Lucas is not going to live forever. But Star Wars will, as long as little kids keep going to the movies and watching stuff on TV and buying action figures. So, again, until we see real evidence, there's no reason to panic. Scott, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, I can't believe that at least his outlines or his thoughts are going to be involved in these movies. It's just awesome what J.J. Abrams has done, though. Just the way it looked, just the trailer, how everything looked. He just took it to a brand new level. But you got to believe that what Lucas had in mind, at least in theory, is going to keep going. It just might not follow the exact detail, but I got to believe the overall view of what the movie's how it's supposed to end. 7, 8, and 9 will actually follow that road. Details here and there might be different, but I would think he wouldn't have sold it without at least telling Disney, "Hey, this is what my ideas are," and hopefully they stick with them. So,
good point. And we know that he created outlines for everything, and how much some of that is being followed or not. I mean, we certainly know there's plenty of rumors about that, but as for us, we're gonna wait and see.
And now, your Espresso Shot with the Bearded Trio.
Welcome, everybody, to another Espresso Shot with the Bearded Trio. I'm Rob Wainfur, bringing you your 5-minute news roundup on Steven Spielberg, John Williams, and George Lucas. And let's start with some John Williams news. And John Williams fan John Wesley Downey has created a YouTube video to start what I think is a worthy campaign. Now, the campaign is to get the AFI, which is the American Film Institute, to give a Lifetime Achievement Award to John Williams. It's hard to think that he's never received the award, whereas Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, and Harrison Ford have all won the award, but John Williams hasn't. So, John Williams fan John Wesley Downey has taken to YouTube to start this campaign. Now, I'll put the link to the video in the show notes. So please go and watch it, and please share it, and let's get the word out there. If anybody deserves a Lifetime Achievement Award, it's got to be John Williams. It's a worthy campaign. It's a great idea. So please, let's support it. George Lucas has appeared on CBS's This Morning to discuss Strange Magic, but the subject soon got onto the Oscars and the recently announced nominations. Now, a lot of controversy and internet buzz is circulating because David Oyelowo wasn't nominated for his sensitive and moving portrayal of Dr. Martin Luther King in Selma.
Everybody has their personal opinions about what, who they think should be. I think David, who was in Red Tails, right, truly one of the great actors of all time. He's really a young talent, and the director Ava is amazing. Not her real first film, but her first real major film. And, I think they're very, very talented people. And, what can I say?
Now, George Lucas went on and slammed the Oscars and Hollywood in particular, calling their decisions more like a political campaign. He showed his frustration for the Academy, saying it's a political campaign. It has nothing to do with artistic endeavor at all. Why do we elect people who drift towards not the most talented, best and brightest we have in the country? It's all political. I think it hurts everybody. Well, what do you think? Is George Lucas right, or do you think it may be a little sour grapes? I'd be interested to know what your opinions are on this subject, on the Oscars, and on George Lucas's comments. Get in touch by leaving a comment on Coffee with Kenobi's website, on their Facebook or Twitter page. Sticking with George Lucas, and the retired director doesn't seem that retired yet. In a quote from LA Times, George Lucas said he plans to make 2 more movies, but don't get too excited, as they are unlikely to ever see a cinema release. The 2 films are experimental movies, much like the student movies Lucas used to make at the University of Southern California. George Lucas said, "The way the films are, they're not really movies that can be released. They're movies more for myself, and maybe I'll show them to some of my friends. It costs more to put them out there than it does to make them," he continued. "These are movies that are never going to make any money or anything." Indiana Jones star John Rhys Davies is set to appear in a new MTV-produced TV show based on Terry Brooks' Shannara series of books. Rhys Davies will play King Eventime in the new show alongside Spanish actress Ivana Baccaru. The first 2 episodes will be directed by Jonathan Liebesman, who brought us Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the awful Battle Los Angeles. Now, star of Jurassic Park, Jeff Goldblum, is to be a dad at the age of 62. He revealed on The Letterman Show that his wife is 3 months pregnant, and he also revealed that the child will be a boy and the name will be Elliot Charlie Goldblum. Congratulations to Jeff and Emily Goldblum. And finally, legendary movie poster master Drew Struzan came out of retirement to paint the poster for the documentary Bat Kid Begins. Now, the documentary tells of Miles Scott, the 5-year-old leukemia patient whose Make-A-Wish request to be a crime fighter prompted all of San Francisco to transform into Gotham City. The event was supported by thousands of residents and onlookers, as well as going viral all over the world. Now, I'll put a link in the show notes so you can check out the poster by Drew Struzan. Bat Kid Begins. Well, that's it for your Espresso Shot with the Bearded Trio. I hope you enjoyed it. Get in touch and let me know what you think of this segment, and also your thoughts on George Lucas's comments on the Oscars. Thanks for listening, and now I'll hand you back to Corey and Dan. Goodbye.
Han Solo, Rebel Soldier, Lando Calrissian, and Bespin Guard, each sold separately. From Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back collection, new from Kenner.
Looking? Found someone you have, I would say,
Your lightsabers will make a fine addition to my collection.
Our first collector's news story, of course, covers the 6-inch Black Series from Hasbro. And I'm excited that Scott is still here with us because, as I mentioned numerous times on our show over the past year and a half, he always gets a kick out of these prices for these things. Why do you get such a big kick out of that?
Because they're ridiculously expensive. I'm ridiculously cheap, so
so we have this perfect harmony here of yin and yang, whatever. So Han Solo, Stormtrooper, and Bosk are out. And before I click on this link, Scott, I would want you to tell, if we're doing a little Coffee with Kenobi prices, right? How much do you think these figures are going to be?
Can you give me a little detail?
Yeah, Corey, wait, let's test your knowledge. What do you remember about the 6-inch Black Series?
Me? Individually, they're 6 inches of well-designed characters. So they're not your, centered, G.I. Joe size, 3 3/4 inch or whatever they call it. So
yeah, they're twice as big.
They're twice as big. They come in a nice packaging. All the accessories are with them. They look like they're straight out of the movie. This has never been done before. This scale. I don't own any of these. Dan, you've got quite a few. I think you got the first round.
I have I have 5 of them. I've got the Sand Trooper. Right. I've got Darth Maul. I've got R2-D2. I can't think of who the other one is. I also have Han Solo.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I also have Luke Skywalker, Rebel Pilot. Duh. So yeah, those are the 5 that I have. I guess this really isn't the big thing because they're pretty much priced the same. So I'll show you this now. This isn't it, and it's going to blow you away. Or maybe, okay.
I was going to say $19.99.
Well, at retail, they're $19.99, but we've got Han Solo as a Stormtrooper, and we've got Bosk. Now, I want to show you, go ahead and Corey, Check out the picture of Bosk.
Yeah, he looks awesome. And I'm not really a Bosk fan, but it looks really cool.
See, I feel like he looks like one of those monsters from Land of the Lost.
Oh my gosh.
A very old reference.
Now that you say it,
or like a Doctor Who monster.
Or the what's the monster that Captain Kirk fought? You ever seen that old thing where he fights that monster? It's like a,
that
gecko,
one.
or it looks like a
episode?
Yeah, right.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Here's what I know. I find that with a lot of these monsters and creatures, even though they're not screen accurate, and we talked about this with Mark Palomo, I like the original Kenner look of these characters, even though they don't really hold up to how they are. They're not always screen accurate. So this Bosk looks tremendous, and it's already, to give everyone an idea, the pre-order is already sold out on Big Bad Toy Store, so it's huge. It's awesome.
Yeah, he looks cool. I think he looks just like right out of Empire Strikes Back, where he's standing up there kind of holding his blaster, and he's got those fingers that are like, don't move, but they're kind of just straight, and I don't know, they're funny looking, but...
Ezra's Gamble, where Bosk was featured so prominently, was how I've always thought Bosk was awesome. I didn't really... In the Clone Wars, he was fine. But I loved him in Ezra's Gamble. So this is fun. It's not one I'm going to be tempted to look at, but I'm looking forward to Celebration when I can actually look at it more closely. That'll be more of a measure. I'm always a sucker for the Stormtroopers, and I've always been enamored. I'm literally using the word enamored when I think about Luke and Han in their Stormtrooper armor. That's just one of my favorite things in all 6 films. And basically, this is the old Stormtrooper sculpt with the old Han Solo sculpt, and just popped off a head and put on top of the Stormtrooper. But it's a nice looking figure. I mean, if I have $20 to burn and I'm out and I see it, that's cool.
Here's my issue with it. You know, as far as I've seen action figures that have helmets that can go on and off, and then you see, you're trying to sculpt a Harrison Ford face. Is this helmet going to be a little bit bigger to be able to represent that? Is it going to be a little bit offset, than a regular Stormtrooper?
I think so.
I just think I find that a little weird as far as, having a set or having them up next to each other and stuff. I obviously leave his helmet off, but I would think it'd just be a little odd shaped.
Sure. Well, here's the thing. Here's the main thing I'm excited about. All right, Scott, you just saw these. They're 6 inches. They're twice the size of the normal figures that you grew up with. They have a Han Solo from Hoth and a Tauntaun, right? And the Tauntaun has to be twice as big too. How much do you think that's going to be?
$39.99.
Okay, Corey.
Higher.
Let's see. Let's see what we've got here. $49.99. That's not bad. What do you think of this one?
It's cool looking. I like it. I'm not a toy collector, but I like it.
What do you think, Corey?
I'm looking on the link. Hold on.
It
wouldn't come up.
I've always loved the Tauntaun. It looks about as accurate as I think you could possibly hope for, and Solo looks cool. I mean, it's fun. I like the idea that they're making these so much bigger and to scale like that. It's pretty cool.
Just looking at this figure,
it's museum quality.
I remember playing with the original Tauntaun, where you jam the character inside the body of the Tauntaun.
Yeah,
that's always kind of weird. But like this one, you're right. It looks just like the designs of the special effects of the design there. So it looks just like the face and the horns and everything. And then even Han Solo's like little hood covering is kind of like swaying in the wind a little bit. It kind of has like a motion to it a little bit. So it looks pretty cool. You know what? I'm not a big collector either, but this looks really great, and it might be something I might need to pick up.
Oh, wow.
So that's big for me to say that.
That is very big for you to say that. I think if it was either this or the Gentle Giant replica ones, those are way more pricey. I think I'd probably err towards this because it's a little more affordable. But yeah, it is. It's nice looking, especially just for... But here's this: if you want to get the Tauntaun, would you rather get one with Han or one with Luke? The Luke one hasn't been announced yet, but I'm assuming that one will be fun too. Which one would you rather have, the Han or the Luke?
I'd rather have Han, because Han seems to be, I don't know, it seems like he uses it more in a better use. I don't know. It seems like he relates to it more than Luke does. Luke, isn't originally seen with it, but Han seems to. I always say that line of him going out and trying to find Luke, and then I'm surprised Han doesn't come with a lightsaber.
Oh, maybe he does. Interesting.
Well,
he does
cool.
take it from Luke.
That's true.
Well, Well, Scott, hey, I know you got to run. You've got other podcasts to appear on and other things to do. But thanks for being the very first guest we've ever had in the studio.
Yeah,
thank you, Dan. It's been great. I'm amazed how much in the last year and a half. Is that about how long you guys have done this?
Mm-hmm.
Have gone from starting up, coming up with an idea, and getting to this point. It's great, and really proud of both of you. And I've known you a long time, and I know how happy this makes you. So it's been really nice to sit in and watch, and I want to come back.
You bet. Anytime, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott.
Luke, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view.
I must be allowed to speak.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
Our topic for show number 31 is Star Wars: A New Hope. Scott Murray of Assembly of Geeks joins us as we continue to look at the 6 existing Star Wars films in reverse order to discuss their overall themes and impact. This is the one that started it all. What are some of the more indelible moments and images? What themes from Star Wars speak the strongest? And how has this specific film made an impact on your life? Welcome, Scott.
Hey guys, good to be with you again.
Yes, this is your third time. Third time is indeed a charm for us because we are having so much fun exploring the films with you. My hope, and of course, a lot of things have to play out, but it would be great to somehow get through all these films and end up on the Phantom Menace right before The Force Awakens. That would work out pretty cool.
Is that a new hope that you have?
It is a new hope that I have. Thank you. Well, what a prescient comment, Scott. So let's just start right into it, gentlemen. What are some of your earliest memories of A New Hope? Scott, why don't we start with you?
Well, really, my earliest memories of A New Hope is the figure collecting, because I was 4 when it came out. So I don't have a physical recollection of being in the theater for the first time. I do have a recollection of how much I loved it as I grew older and saw the other films. My co-host on Assembly of Geeks, Jeff McGee, who is a blogger for you guys, he loves the story that I always tell of how my mom always is telling everybody that what happened that day in the theater was I was kind of a hyper kid. So she said I was running up and down the theater aisles, and then the moment that music started and the Imperial Star Destroyer rolled over the screen, I froze and didn't move for the rest of the film. So I don't remember that, but I trust what my mom says, because that totally sounds like the sort of thing that would have happened to me as a kid, especially as it relates to Star Wars. So I don't remember exactly seeing it for the first time, but I do remember how many times I watched every chance I had. And, that's when all the obsession started. And that's when going to the toy store to see what new figures had come out and continuing the adventures of Luke Skywalker and everybody came from. So, I just look at it as just my early roots of geekdom and fandom, because that's really what it started it all for me.
Corey, what about you?
Yeah, I didn't grow up with it. I didn't get to see it in theaters originally. And I can't remember where I saw it first. I want to assume it was on VHS, a copy of it, taped off TV. But I just have these memories of it just playing in the background, or just having it on and rewatching those iconic scenes over and over again, and introduced to these new characters and these amazing adventures that are going on. And it just introduces so many things to you in such a length of time of a film that I hadn't seen before as a kid. It's something that we constantly talk about on our show here. Just the themes of adventure and a hero's journey and aliens and death-defying traps and rescues and lightsaber battles and villains and everything. Just the power of it, I think, is so huge over my entire life that it's obviously impacted all that I do, really. I mean, it's the one that started it all, like we said. And for me, it's something that's always going to be one of my fondest memories of just reciting the lines, and it's so quotable too. I think in general in pop culture today, it's almost like you can't have any iconic TV show or mantra out there without putting Star Wars into it somehow or some way, and some little wink of the eye or something. It seems like it's in everything nowadays, and it's just all over. And I'm so excited about that. That I had that as a kid, and I can explore those same kind of themes and enjoy that with my own kids as well.
How my wife saw it the first time? She saw it in a drive-in theater.
Same with me.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've told the story on a couple of different shows, other podcasts too. But my first memory was my cousin. We weren't allowed to see PG movies, and my mom would ask my cousin if Star Wars was a safe film for a young man to see. I was 6 or 7 at the time, and which now it seems like heck, kids go to probably more challenging films at younger ages. But that's more of a commentary on the culture than anything. So we went a number of times to see it. It was always sold out. And the first time I did see it was much like your wife, Scott. I saw it at a drive-in, and it was a game changer. I just remember being completely riveted. I swear, in my mind, my mouth was open the whole time, but who knows? And it completely blew me away. The big thing for me, and I think I talked about this earlier too, when it came out on tape, on video, that was when Beta was popular, not VHS. Betamax, kids, is an older form of home video entertainment where the tape was much smaller, but the quality was supposed to be a lot stronger. And there was a video place. We had bought the figures. I talked before about my first figure being C-3PO and all that. And so this video store was pretty close to where I grew up. They had a membership where for $100 you could come and rent movies. And now, of course, that seems insane, but that was the way that it was, because every tape, you didn't see tapes out to purchase or videos out to purchase anywhere else. Everything was priced for rental. It wasn't priced for purchase. They were very expensive. So it was either join this club for $100 and rent Star Wars or anything else you want to see, any movie that it was in the store, or spend $100 and buy Star Wars. And of course, what did I say? Well, let's buy Star Wars. I mean, honestly, what else would I want to watch?
Right.
And they were like, no. If you do this, you can see any movie, including Star Wars. So I begrudgingly gave in, at the tender age of 7. And then from that point on, anytime I got any money, I stocked it away. And eventually we did get Star Wars, and we ran that thing to the ground like both of you did too. Star Wars is, as you both said, it's just a big part of my childhood. It's a big part of growing up. It's a big part of who I am as an adult, as a teacher, as a parent. And it's phenomenal. This truly is the movie that started it all. And we talked earlier, before we even started taping, it's challenging to talk about Star Wars, the first film, because, so much has been said and written and broadcasted and filmed about it. So to come up with a fresh approach is a challenge, but there's so much there that there's plenty. And the big thing I want to talk about is, of course, the 3 big characters, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Princess Leia. Naturally, they're icons. You don't even have to have seen a Star Wars film to know who these characters are. So just taking this film exclusively, how do you feel like they evolve throughout the story? And do you think they are well-rounded characters? Corey, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I've been thinking about this film since we kind of talked about doing this with Scott, and I was thinking about all the other films that kind of came out in that 70s era. And not too many of them explore this hero's journey. So even right there with Luke, and as far as I know, maybe I'm just seeing it my own way, but Luke is that character that everybody wants to be as a kid. Especially, we always relate it to our childhood, because we're so impressionable then, and seeing Luke grow up through this movie and become a young man, and obviously save the day. But I think even with Han Solo and Princess Leia, you have other choices. Not just Luke. You have Han, you have Leia, and it's just, you have a wide range of characters that don't get along, but yet they flow together perfectly through the storyline. And like you said, Dan, you can't mention Star Wars without mentioning one of those characters. They're so iconic in culture today. as far as role models, as far as scoundrels, and we always equate it. It always seems like they put a movie out like Guardians of the Galaxy, let's say. It was huge because it's like, oh, it's the Star Wars of this era or something like that. And because it was Star Wars themselves, their characters were so driven and so thought out and so well acted. I think even for a small film like that to transcend multiple years, even to last year's Guardians of the Galaxy, that we're still looking back to these films, back to these characters, and going, oh my gosh, it's just like that guy. Or even you could throw Darth Vader in there too. Obviously, we're talking about the big three, but it's just so impressionable. I think even as us kids and even as adults, because in the 70s it had never been done in that way or that form.
Yeah, you were talking about how well acted this is, and I agree with that. Although what's really mind-boggling to me is if you hit YouTube and you look at some of those early auditions and what the dialogue was then.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Frightening.
How could anybody say some of those lines? The stuff that's really, really sophisticated and has all this, sci-fi scientific jargon in it, one thing after another. And you're just like thinking they're speaking another language. It's fascinating how it changed from that to what we ended up seeing.
Well, Harrison Ford's quote, of course, you're probably thinking about that, right? You can type this stuff, but you can't say it.
Yeah,
he said it a little more explicitly than that.
Yeah. But, it's interesting. I think that there's a lot more growth in the first film between Luke and Han, which I think says a lot about Princess Leia in the sense that, she makes it pretty clear who she is and what she's about. I think very early on, she's a non-stereotypical, like damsel in distress princess that needs rescuing. I mean, once the door goes open, she's ready to grab a blaster and go. And I thought that was a great thing about her. And wasn't going to let the guys always pretend to be in charge, especially Han Solo. And then, of course, down the road, that's kind of how she changes and evolves a little bit because she kind of grows to like Han over time, and they form a very different relationship than they had early on. But you have Luke, who is this simple farm boy who, in the back of his mind, knows that he's probably meant for something better, and then is suddenly dropped into the middle of the galactic civil war and has to figure out not only what his role is, but also that he's force sensitive and has to figure out who his father is and save a princess and do all these other things, and kind of grow up really, really fast, go from the farm to war, basically. And then you have Han, who up to this point was, like a lot of smugglers, very much about being in it for the money and getting the job done and getting paid by all means necessary. And you don't get personally involved in things or people. And, by the end of that film, you can see him change a little bit as well. And, of course, he ends up playing a big role in the destruction of the Death Star. So he had a very big turning point at the end of the film. So it set the stage for, obviously what we saw in the two films following that. But, there was still a lot that happened with those three characters. I mean, if anything, it was good enough to where when you left the movie theater, I think you had a pretty solid understanding of who these three people were.
I agree. I think this is pretty much a perfect story. It's pretty much a perfect film. And, talk about bias. We're all biased. Let's just be honest about that. I think that they're as well-rounded in this one as they are in any of them. I think Luke is always a dynamic character in all three films. I don't think you can say the same thing about Han Solo and Princess Leia, especially in Return of the Jedi. Well, that's not really their role anyway. But here you have a beginning, a middle, and end for each character as far as their arc, their story. Leia's is the only one that is left a little bit open and very exciting. In March, we're going to get to see Terry Dodson's look at Leia and what happens to her immediately after the destruction of the Death Star. So we're going to finally get to see more about her story. Talk about a long time coming. The challenge with Leia is that her planet is destroyed. Okay, destroyed. Everything about it, every single person, every single plant, every single animal, every single place that she ever visited, every place she ever dreamed about seeing, it's gone. It's gone forever. That is so huge that we can't even possibly rationalize it. She even says at the ending, "There's no time for our sorrows now, Commander." She's very focused on the mission. She is a leader. She is a strong leader, and she pretty much revolutionized the way women were looked at in the 70s. I think if we look at it through the lens of 2015, it doesn't look like that for a number of reasons. The one that sticks out to me specifically is the fact that at the end, Leia's in an X-Wing cockpit. She's back in the control center sort of watching things unfold on a giant screen. So I think if it was made in modern times, that would change. And I talked about that on show number 30 as well with Lillian. But I think they are fascinating. You don't have a movie without these three. They're all interesting. I mean, you have people who like Han Solo, you have people who like Luke Skywalker, and it seems like you either gravitate towards one or the other for whatever reason, even though you like both of them. Very similar to Harry and Ron, although this is even more than that because both Han or Luke could carry the story on their own if manipulated in a certain way. I don't think you could say that about Harry Potter. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it because it's definitely Luke's, he's the driving force. He seems to be the audience a little bit, where these other characters are coming from different backgrounds, different situations, but they're all driving for the same goal at the end. You talked about Leia being assigned the times of. I think her character in this film never wavers. She never backs down and falls into that trap of the damsel in distress. She's always pointing the blaster and telling what people do and making quips, and she's going to get it done. And you can see that all the way through the film. And I didn't grow up in the 70s, so I can't relate to the other films that were at the time that that were coming out and the roles that women were in. I related her role a little bit to a Lois Lane type. She's looking for the story. She's going to get the job done whether somebody else does it or not. And you said it too, Dan, that she's got this great loss that she just sees with her own eyes, that she is even more powerful than that. She doesn't melt into a puddle and start sobbing uncontrollably. She obviously has her moment, but she stands firm, stands strong against Vader and his cronies and the Empire. And like you said too, remind me if I'm wrong at this, but wasn't it the fact that Lucas originally had Luke as a female character?
That's right.
So that was a variable possibility, I think, in the context of a story at one point.
Well, and this is all covered really well in Chris Taylor's book, How Star Wars Conquered the Universe. So if you haven't picked it up yet, I can't recommend it highly enough because it covers a lot of the background and how these films were made, especially A New Hope. So we talked a little bit. Do you think there is gender bias in this film? Is it more of a product of the times, or is there something else to it? And before we even start, I do want to point out George Lucas is not sexist. He's not racist. He's a smart, intelligent, well-rounded guy who knows how to tell a proper story. I'm going to say that this is a product of the times of when the film was made, and it pushed the envelope, as we mentioned, about what a female character can be. And whether she was holding a gun or leading the charge down the detention center of the Death Star, she makes a presence for herself, and you see that vulnerability, but she embraces what happens and fights forward because she's fighting for something more than herself. She's a leader.
Yeah, well, and George Lucas, if I'm not mistaken, has won awards.
That's right.
For his portrayal of women in film. And yeah, I agree. I mean, whether, I don't think he's any of those things either. And yeah, I mean, there are very few things in 1977 that weren't different about this film.
Right.
Just about everything we were seeing, even though so much of it mirrors mythology and religion and culture and so many different things. Yeah, I mean, I think, I think that she is she's an equal, if anything else. I mean,
right. That's very important.
It's not get behind me. We'll take care of this. Because she's going to say, no, you get behind me. Get this walking carpet out of my way.
Yeah.
I'll take care of it. So
if it wasn't for her, they may have died before they got into the garbage compactor.
Right. So, it's just going to be interesting to see how that evolves now. We're talking about 1977 and what things were then. And, of course, now as we get ready for The Force Awakens, we know that there is a stronger female presence in the films, more than just one character, which I know is very important to a lot of, young women and girls that grew up even back then. That thank goodness Princess Leia was there, because that was who they could rally behind,
right,
and relate to. And now that we're in 2015. A lot more has evolved and a lot more seems to be changing, where there's going to be more than that in the future films. But for its time, she could have been any number of things, and it was quite revolutionary for her to be such a take action type of girl. I mean, when you think in 1977, if someone said princess, you probably wouldn't have thought of the leader of a rebel force and good with a blaster and all the things that she is. The other thing that was really good about Leia throughout the entire trilogy too was we talk about how she softens up a little bit for Han, and how they kind of grow as a couple. She also is very tactical as to when she picks her moments to let that guard down. Right. She kind of knows when to do it and when not to do it, whether it be for him not to get too confident or for her not to lose focus at what the bigger picture is. So she was definitely a well-rounded character and someone who made her presence known very early. And it kind of set the stage of what Star Wars can be now in 2015.
I agree, and I can't help but feel like very similar to Padme. I think both Padme and Leia they're the strongest at the original of their respective three films. I think they get a little bit weaker as they go along, there could be a number of reasons for that. It certainly has nothing to do with the performances, and we sort of hint around to this, but I think you can't talk about this film without talking about Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, and Carrie Fisher. They bring such a joy to the screen. They sell this material that could be challenging to sell. And, I mean, let's face it, they are such a reason why Star Wars is as popular as it is.
Sure. And that's why we're so lucky that they're all still around and able to act in 2015 to carry on the story.
I know. Right. It's amazing. So let's talk about themes in this film. When we talked about The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, we talked about some prevalent themes. There are a few that stand out to me. What makes a hero? Truth and lies, and then friendship. Any other themes that you think we should bring up as well, or do you just want to jump into these?
Well, I think there's also political themes, obviously. I mean,
sure.
Tyrantry, and the little people that rise up of the rebellion.
Right.
So things of that nature as well.
Any for you, Scott?
No, I mean, really in a lot of ways, I mean, it just kind of sets the stage for the good old fight between good and evil.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, and both sides are pretty well established. It's just, it's just that great story, the hero's journey story of, coming from a farm and yet being destined to be, well, it's interesting. Back then, we all kind of thought Luke was the chosen one, and then later we find out Vader was the chosen one, or Anakin was, and Luke was just the one that had to redeem him. This kid that grew up in this little farm on this planet full of sand ended up starting his journey here to what would eventually have a lot riding on his shoulders.
There's something refreshing too about there's not a lot of ambiguity. Han Solo maybe is the most ambiguous of anybody, and even that you can still pretty much tell where he's going to go, even though it takes him a little bit longer for him to realize that. But the good guy wears white, the bad guy wears black. That's refreshing. It's refreshing. It's very much in vogue now to not necessarily have that or have things twisted and bent. And there's certainly some merit in that, and that has its own rewards as well. But I like that it's very clear who the bad guys are, who the good guys are. What motivates them sometimes is something that you have to learn about as time goes on. But the idea of heroism, the idea that you have to leave your family and try to make your way on your own, you're going to encounter different people on the journey, some good, some bad. You go through tests and trials and tribulations, and you come out of it a stronger person, a more self-aware person, very much the classical Joseph Campbell hero's journey, which again, as we know through How Star Wars Conquered the Universe, wasn't even something that was really on Lucas's radar until after he wrote A New Hope. But you can't help but look back on that and see how perfectly and beautifully it lines up, which is really, really fun.
Yeah, I also think about how Robert McKee, the story expert, in his courses has, I believe, often said that, films and stories are about choices and driven by choices. And, Luke making the choice that, after his aunt and uncle have died, that yes, I will follow you, even though I've heard you're kind of this crazy old guy. I'm going to follow you. I want to learn the ways of the Force. I want to become a Jedi like my father, and I'm going to put myself in the middle of this conflict. And then the choices to go inside that Death Star and rescue the princess, the choices to risk your life for this movement, put your self behind an X-Wing fighter and try to destroy this gigantic battle station, and several other choices he has to make along the way. And I've always remembered that because, if you watch any film, especially any really good film, that if you pay close attention, you'll notice how many choices the lead characters and the most impactful characters make through the course of an hour and a half or 2 hours that really drive a story.
Yeah, and the other thing that comes to mind as far as themes in this is diversity. I think we've talked about diversity before numerous times on the show here, but I'm just recalling the way they walk in the cantina and the diversity of creatures and beings and every who kind of lives in this universe. Every kind of seems to get along in some respects. I mean, everybody has their job and everybody has, choice. Like you said, Scott, their choices they make in their lives to do good or do bad or whatever. And it just shows so many different variations of that theme. Even through the big three we talked about, they have choices they make and different backgrounds they come from. So it's almost tying in the themes of, it doesn't matter where you come from and it doesn't matter who you are. You can always still rise to greatness and become better than who you're either where you're at in life. And there's a lot of truth in that in this film, I think, taking that on and becoming a good theme of goodness and positivity through the film.
Right. Yeah. The idea, I mean, it's called A New Hope, and of course it didn't happen until 82. But I think that or was it 81?
What?
When they added in A New Hope.
Oh.
It was either 1981 or 1982. And I knew this for a fact until I said that last sentence.
It wasn't on a trivia card.
I'm pretty sure it's 1982. I'm going to say 1982. And if I'm wrong, the world will still spin.
Yeah, send us an email.
Yeah, please do. The heroism here that you both mentioned, very Tolkien in nature, as far as even the smallest person can make a difference. R2-D2 and C-3PO. Mm-hmm. They're heroic in their own way. They make more of an immediate impact in later films, but I mean, you're not going to accomplish a lot of things you do without C-3PO and R2-D2. They're certainly heroic in their own right, and that leads us to kind of, as I said, friendship is a popular theme in this. It's very prevalent, showing again, as Rebels does, that you accomplish more in a community with friends. Let's talk real quickly. Let's give Obi-Wan Kenobi the reprieve that he so desperately needs from so many fans. Obi-Wan Kenobi, a young Jedi named Darth Vader, was a pupil of mine before he turned evil, helped the Empire hunt down and destroy the Jedi Knights. He betrayed and murdered your father. Is Obi-Wan Kenobi a liar?
No.
No,
because...
No. Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's a good meme. There's a couple of good memes floating around where, you have Obi-Wan sitting there talking to Luke and goes, yes, and then I cut his legs off.
Yeah, I saw
it. Yeah. And I'm just sitting here thinking, okay, so what if that was the dialogue? Is that really what you want to tell that kid right then and there?
Yeah, I'm going to say no.
So I say that there was purpose behind why he had to articulate it the way he did. Because everything that, Obi-Wan's been around a long time at that point. And he's, of course, we've never really, at that point when that movie came out, we didn't know how much he'd been watching Luke from afar or what was going on there. But, big things, he knew what Luke was going to be potentially capable of. And he was going to have to be real careful because, Anakin got angry and wigged out, and we know what happened to him. You couldn't take that kind of risk with Luke. So every little thing that Obi-Wan said and did had to be thoughtfully thought through, not to be repetitive there, but carefully thought through and articulated in a certain way so you didn't, put too much pressure on him or make him angry or anything of that nature. And so if he said, yeah, I killed your dad and, and he's out there and as a result is hunting people down in the galaxy. I don't think that's something Luke was ready to hear at that point. I think when he did hear it, and he could go back to Yoda and ask about it and have that conversation later, that was the best way to do it. He was much more mature. He knew about the Force. He knew about Vader. He knew about the cause. And, like Obi-Wan said, from a certain point of view, what he said was true to a certain degree. You can't say it was untrue.
Right.
He just, had to articulate it a certain way because there was a lot of risk involved in what he was going to try to get Luke to do at that moment.
And so much of Star Wars is metaphorical too. He did betray and murder his father. Darth Vader, the Sith notion of the entity that was Anakin Skywalker, did betray and murder the truths that Anakin Skywalker clung and held on to. And like you said, you can't. It's not necessarily what is said, but the timing of when something is said. As far as the impact that it has, this would be a much different franchise if all the cards are on the table right away. I mean, even Lando will tell you're not going to show all your cards right away. And Corey, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to kind of mirror what Scott said as far as, you put it in language that is not going to frighten a young man that's coming into his own, and obviously it's a big blow to him if he was to tell the truth. I also think that, as I get older and kind of rewatch the films and with all the material is out there now, Clone Wars and Rebels and all the new comics and stuff we see coming out, it just reinforces these characters' reasoning behind saying certain things. Like we talked about Yoda in Rebels talking to Ezra and kind of Yoda himself being more mature in that aspect of looking at things differently. And I think, all along Obi-Wan has come along and been in solitude to himself to learn things and rethink everything. And even this, he saw the worst way possible Anakin's downfall. So now he's like, how am I going to kind of edge this into, a good territory where, the best outcome can be. And he's kind of dancing around this thing. It's difficult. You can't, how do you tell somebody that, your dad is a murderer and he's Darth Vader and he's killing everybody? Obviously Luke would lash out and want to destroy him too. And it's a whole different concept there. But I think that, it's more of, just Obi-Wan being wise in his ways over time. He may be a little kooky, but I think he has the right to do what he did.
Technically, it is not the full truth. So technically, it is a lie, but he's not a liar. It's tactful and it's wise to disseminate the information in an appropriate fashion. So I think that's a very specific way of looking at it, and I don't think it allows for the realization that the world is not just black and white, but there is a lot of gray.
Well, would it be blasphemous to?
I like this already.
Yeah. Would it be blasphemous to look at Star Trek as a means of kind of figuring out a way to get around such a thing? I always think of how
not at all. Yeah, knowledge is power.
I always think about, that kind of running thing that they had in the early Star Trek films where, Spock would figure out a way to get around lies. And there's a moment where someone says to him, I think it's Kirstie Alley that says, "You lied." And he just goes, "I exaggerated."
Right.
In a way, Obi-Wan exaggerated. And then later on, I think Spock asked Kim Cattrall, who also plays a Vulcan at one point in time, says a lie, and she goes, "A choice."
That's right. And that's so badly screwed up their logic that they both either ended up purchasing a bar or becoming wild in New York. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
That would be a Cheers in the Sex and the City reference for the uninitiated. Yeah, I know you both did.
You're talking about Sex and the City, is that what you said?
Yes.
Well, see, I always think of her in Mannequin, too.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember that. I love that movie.
Wait, is that the one where he goes into like the department store and falls in love with the mannequin?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's
got Hollywood in it.
Oh.
That's right. It's certainly not creepy in any way.
It's got
hashtag sarcasm.
James Spader and Estelle Getty and...
Yeah.
It must be from the 70s.
No, it's 80s.
No, it's 80s.
It's definitely 80s. Had a good song from Starship.
Yes.
So that is, maybe we'll just start a new podcast about mannequins.
That's right.
We'll actually have negative downloads.
Macchiatos with mannequins. Sure.
That's right. So anyway, there's so much more we could say about A New Hope. Isn't it great? I was just talking about this the other day with someone, and it was actually my son. He said, "You know what? Don't take this the wrong way." But at first I thought, how could you possibly have anything to talk about with Star Wars that wouldn't just last for a couple of weeks? But we're seeing, as we always do, and they talked about this on a recent episode of Full of Sith, that it's not that there's so little, it's just there's so much. It's just boundless. So let's look at what makes this film resonate with modern audiences. I'm not talking about when it came out in 1977 or 1980 or 1983. Why is it still popular and successful for modern audiences? Or is it? Because
I think it is. I mean, I just think it resonates. It just resonates differently to generations in different ways. We talk frequently on Assembly of Geeks, and we continue to talk about it because it's becoming more and more of a big deal that people are entering certain fandoms at different times and different generations. We're talking about more or less our Star Wars, where we came into Star Wars, and now we had people who came in during the prequels, and here pretty soon we're going to have people who very well may come in during 7, 8, and 9 that are going to go back at some point in time and watch 4, 5, and 6. And it's probably going to impact them in a different way. But I think inevitably, more often than not, even though it may not resonate the same way, they still love it. And I think they still love it because, good storytelling is timeless. I mean, all the films and all the books and all the things that people continue to read and talk about and love, no matter how many decades old they are, they continue to appeal to the masses because it's good storytelling, it's good characters, and we know how this is deeply rooted in other successful stories and mythology and history and other inspirations. So, you're kind of hard pressed to have a story like that not continue to inspire and entertain generation after generation.
As I sit here and think about this question, I think about just, obviously my kids and I don't want to equate it to my kids too much because not everybody has kids or whatnot. And you said everybody comes into it at a different age. But this film, I think, it's an American film, and films today are so prevalent in our pop culture and what we do daily. And so this film holds up. And the lightsabers and the effects are not perfect for audiences today, but I think, like you said, the storytelling and the characters are so transcending as far as audience are viewing it for the first time. And I do relate to my kids, and as much as we talk about it, we always talk about our childhood memories of Star Wars. That's how we started this out. We all were young watching it for the first time, and that just tells me that if you're going to show anybody a film, what's the best time to show them a film? When they're a kid, when they can enjoy it and just have a sense of imaginative about it. Just their senses firing in all cylinders and just going, oh my gosh, this is incredible. But you can sit down as an adult and watch it and still have those same experiences. I think it just does so much for the film industry too. Like we talked about, it transcends so many things as far as like storytelling and the characters, and I don't know. It's just like it's lasted this long through everything we've seen in film, and the ups and downs, and it's just one for the ages.
When Star Wars was translated into the Navajo language recently, I think we saw what it does for modern audiences who were previously not privy to the wonder that is Star Wars. And I think this is a very relevant, important question, because I've mentioned this before as well, but when I show Star Wars in my classes, at least half of every section of students that I have has never seen this movie. And for some of us that is so unfathomable, but it's very much a reality. You know, a lot of people have never seen Star Wars. We don't know them, but they exist. And I think it's interesting because when this film first came out, it was thought of as very quick and very fast and very rapid. And a lot of that was because of George Lucas's masterful editing and the pacing and the way they deliver their lines. See, real quick. Yeah. Like in the 40s. Now it's slow. In fact, I've heard people say that they think it's boring. Of course, that makes my ears bleed a little bit to hear that. But I don't think it's boring, obviously, but I grew up with it. But the reason I bring this up is it still resonates because there's still those deep-rooted ideas of the mythology, of the modern myth, taking a very classic archetype and creating it for a then modern audience. It still speaks today because there are just so many iconic things and moments there. That's why I really think it's important, and maybe important is not the right word, but to me it is important that Star Wars is shown to kids when they're kids so they can experience it with a sense of wonder. And I've said this many times too. I think I've said this many times as much as I've actually said the things I'm talking about tonight. But when I think that you were younger and you see Star Wars for the first time, I honestly think you should be shown the original version, not the special edition, just to kind of take it in the way that it was originally filmed, because that's classic. I mean, that's what the Library of Congress has. They have Star Wars, and it's the original version. Of course, the special edition is in, or Blu-ray, or however you want to call it, is in there too. But there's something about the fact that it was so revolutionary in so many ways when it was first created. It's a miracle in itself. The journey to make Star Wars is as incredible as Luke Skywalker's journey to leave Tatooine and blow up the Death Star and become a leader in the Rebel Alliance. It's an amazing film that still speaks to so many today. So, guys, any last-minute thoughts or comments about A New Hope?
Yeah, it was something in 2015 that I think about a lot, and I don't know that George has gotten to talk a lot about this. And maybe it's because it might be kind of, tricky to, he's kind of, I know he's kind of an introvert, so I don't know how much he would talk about himself, but, but somewhere, I just wish you could kind of get inside his head and what it must be like for him today to think he wrote this little script in the 70s, that had these things called Jawas and Wookiees, and I always think of the fake Saturday Night Live auditions.
Yes.
What the hell is a Jawa? Yeah. And how hard it was for him to get that movie even made, because the time period and people are looking at this, I don't even know what I'm looking at. And he had the friend at 20th Century Fox that went ahead and gave him the opportunity to make it. And originally he was just hoping to make enough money to make another one. And then obviously that happened. But gosh, what do you think it's like for him to sit back and think about, when you think of how many movies, TV shows, animated programs, costumes, video games, books, comics, and now they just got done doing 3 films again. in the early 2000s. Now they're doing 3 more. That little idea he had on that piece of paper that he originally could not even get sold to a studio is what it is right now.
Yeah.
That has to be just really something to think about today for him, to look back on. Just, I think about that a lot when I'm playing the Old Republic and I'm going to a Star Wars event thinking, gosh, all this is possible because that guy had this idea in his head and this is what it is now. That somebody sat down, thought this up, and this is what it's become. And everybody knows what it is. Even if you haven't seen it, most people at least know what it is and have seen it somewhere. And it's just, I just wonder what that must be like for him to stop and think that that little idea has been so much for so many years and is still going today.
Yeah, it also brings up a good point there, Scott. Don't give up on your dreams type thing. If you're the smallest idea you may have might be the next Star Wars. You equate it to that.
Right.
And it's funny to think about too, what if it never was? Think about all the things it's impacted in culture and in society. It's amazing what it's become, this giant movement in film and in industry almost. We talked about earlier, it's just some of the films that just tried to emulate it in some shape and form, or just pull from it the characters, or even parody it, in the best of terms, and because it's so beloved, I think, for so many people, and it'll always hold up, I think, as an iconic film. It's just going to be what it is. That is what it's meant to be, and as much as you talked about, Scott, just George sitting down going to bed at night and thinking like, I did something awesome. I think it's hard to wrap your mind around that concept, because I don't think he ever expected that, and I kind of see it as like these little indie films that come out at Sundance or something like that. People are kind of, this is my life's work. This is my small little idea I had. And I finally got a chance to put it out there and let people see it on my own budget, on my own time, and explore a theme that I'm really excited about. And it just gives hope to so many people out there that have an idea, or have something that they want to share with the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's important not to give up on your dream, but unlike in 1977, in 2015, you probably shouldn't have part of your dream producing a film and being able to keep all the licenses and rights to every single thing you did, because that stuff doesn't happen anymore. But, but other than that, you can hold on to everything else.
That's right.
Well, the only other last minute thing I want to say about this, and this easily could have been a 2 or 3 part show, is John Williams.
Yes.
The music of John Williams has been said the oxygen of Star Wars. I certainly can't argue with that. His contribution, as well as Ben Bird's incredible sound effects.
Yeah.
Those two things I think if you watch Star Wars with the sound off, I think you're getting half of a film. I mean, even more than most other films, because just the clicks of the Stormtrooper armor, the iconic, incredible sound of the lightsaber, the TIE fighters, John Williams' music, the themes, it adds so much to that film. The only thing I think that even comes close to that is Raiders of the Lost Ark, as far as how important the music is to the actual storytelling itself.
I like that. Good point.
So, Scott, this has been incredibly fun, as always, going through the films with you. It's going to be so awesome to talk about the prequels with you, which, of course, are very different films.
Yeah.
But so much to talk about and discern through them, so that's great. And speaking of great, if you aren't the busiest guy in podcasting, I don't know who is. Can you tell us a little bit about the shows that you're working on right now, and where listeners can get in touch with you if they want to ask you a question or just say hello?
Absolutely. Of course, I'm at assemblyofgeeks.com. We have a number of ways to contact us there. All that comes to me, so feel free to say hi to me or anybody, Jeff or Amy. We, of course, have the ongoing show there, the Geek Assembly podcast. We've had a lot of fun doing the Peggy Carter podcast this year. We have, there, as with Assembly Geeks, it's a very unique program. It not only dissects the show, each episode with commentary from Lauren Galloway and Amy Marie and myself. It's also mixed with 40s music and 40s radio ads and a number of other things just to keep it even more entertaining. We've received a lot of good listener feedback on that, including from some of the people from Agent Carter. In fact, we've had feedback from a couple of the writers and producers there that have enjoyed the show. So that's gone very, very well. And I co-host the Flash podcast with Andy, and that's at theflashpodcast.com. And that's been a lot of fun and also a very good show. So, yeah, a lot of geek, a lot of podcasting, and thankfully still time to come here and talk Star Wars.
Oh, yes. Well, we're certainly very thankful. And something we're pretty excited about, you blog for Coffee with Kenobi.
Yes, my first one comes out on the 24th. I'm very excited. It's an honor to join all the other really good writers here. And I'm jumping right in feet first with something that definitely gets people talking.
Yes.
But I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about defending things that are worth defending. So I come to bat in my first blog for Jar Jar Binks and the Ewoks. So
it's a great read. At the time this comes out, it will be out, so you can certainly check that, and we will put a link in our show notes to that, as well as to all the exciting things you have going on. Scott, thanks again so much for being on the show and being such an important part of the Coffee with Kenobi family.
It's my pleasure, guys. I'm glad to be here anytime.
More to add, do you?
Our first discussion email came from Kenny Crowley, and he says, "Hello, Coffee with Kenobi, Dan and Corey. Here are my reflections on Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. It's my favorite Star Wars film for a number of reasons. Number 1, it is the start of the Star Wars and the beginning of the great film series. Number 2, the hero's journey that Luke Skywalker takes on, it's amazing. Number 3, the special effects and sound design. Number 4, the heroes and the bad guys from our main 3, Han, Luke, Leia, to Darth Vader, Tarkin, and the Empire. And number 5, John Williams' musical score is one of the best of all time in film history. Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, is an amazing film. Keep up the great work, and may the Force be with you always." And that's from Kenny Crowley. And he loves writing into us, sending us his thoughts. And certainly I can't disagree with any of that. Dan, can you?
No, I mean, and Kenny Crowley, let's be honest, he's a rock star, man. Yeah. He's a rock star in fandom. He's so loyal, and he's just so kind. He's always got so many positive things to say to not only us, but Assembly of Geeks and Rebel Force Radio and Full Sith. He's just, he's awesome. So we love your thoughts, Kenny. Thank you so much. And our next email comes from Josh Woodson, and he says, "Hey guys, saw your request on Twitter. When I was young, A New Hope was my least favorite original trilogy film because the pacing of the story was a little slow for a 7-year-old, especially when compared to my all-time favorite film, Return of the Jedi. Now that I'm an adult, I think I appreciate A New Hope more than Return of the Jedi for a couple of reasons. First, it is the only Star Wars film you can watch that has a true beginning, middle, and end as a self-contained story. It's the only film that you can understand as it was originally intended to be presented without any background knowledge from the other Star Wars films. Second, the film created the great team dynamic between Han, Luke, and Leia, supported by Chewbacca and the droids, that is now inspiring great adventures in the Star Wars canon, such as Marvel's new Star Wars series. While there are glimpses of the teamwork present in the other 2 original trilogy films, at least one of the main 3 characters is almost always absent. A New Hope, more than any of the other films, allows the big 3 to shine the most. It'll be interesting to see if we get to see all 3 of them together again in The Force Awakens and what has changed. Keep up the great show, Josh Woodson." Well, thank you, Josh. You point out a lot of things that I love about A New Hope too, and I have thought about that. The fact that A New Hope is the one that shows the 3 of them together the most and creates that backbone to their relationships, and that is a pretty powerful thing.
It truly is, and he makes a good point too. It's looking at it with a child's eyes, you kind of see it in a different way or remember it in a different way, and as you grow older, you come to understand the way it was built and the way the story was told and the characters were introduced. And, as we've talked before, we get older, we, talk about showing the film to somebody else and and even our kids and stuff. And I always come back to that. It just as you get older and mature in age, and as far as looking at the saga with different eyes, older eyes, you understand the world, you understand your life, and you can kind of play that into A New Hope, and of course all the films can relate to that too as well. But that's the one that started it all, and it just you kind of love it more. You kind of like, oh yeah, this really is the one that was started everything and started my fandom. So it seems to be kind of the favorite in a sense in that kind of recollection. Our next comment comes from our Coffee with Kenobi Facebook page from Alberto Sanchez, and he says, "I'll never forget the smile of Obi-Wan just before becoming one with the Fourth." Fourth? One with the Fourth. May the Fourth be with you. Yeah.
For you to say.
I'll never forget the smile of Obi-Wan just before he became one with the Force. So much confidence and serenity. Definitely a good comment to make, Alberto. And I think back that too, that the kind of that smile where he kind of gives like he knows a little bit something that Vader doesn't know, and that security and knowing he put his faith in Luke, and he is the New Hope. So it's definitely a classic scene.
Yeah, a nice moment of characterization that speaks a lot with a little bit of screen time. Our next email comes from our good friend Aaron Harris, who is, of course, the amazing individual who covers Star Wars weekends for us and blogs for us. And he writes, Dan and Corey, it's been too long, my friends. Hopefully this finds you well. Just saw the post requesting thoughts on A New Hope, and I couldn't pass this up. Hopefully this makes it before the cutoff, and it sure did. A New Hope means the most to me than any of the other movies. It was the first Star Wars movie I saw, and it started my love for the saga. I remember as a kid flipping over the coffee table and blasting stormtroopers as they stormed to Tantive 4. I remember wishing I had the lightsaber and that I could fly the Falcon. I wanted to have the power of Obi-Wan Kenobi, the youthful nature of Luke, and the cocky attitude of Han. If that would have happened, I would have become quite the powerful Sith, I believe. Off topic, sorry. A New Hope was the beginning of something special when I first saw it. It inspired me to look beyond my current situations and look at the possibilities. A New Hope also introduced me to the great John Williams. His music has been a source of inspiration, relaxation, and pure enjoyment since the first note I heard. A New Hope changed my life and set me on a path of fandom I love to be on. Keep up the great work, and I can't wait to hear what is in store in 2015. May the Force be with you all, Aaron. Aaron, wonderful thoughts as always, my friend.
Yeah, definitely good thoughts. I mean, everybody kind of has that initial burst of reaction, when they're kids, seeing it for the first time, and certainly it's not passed up on Aaron here, remembering some great memories and some having some good times, and certainly enjoyed it. So thank you, Aaron, for the writing in. Our next comment comes from again on our Facebook page, our Coffee with Kenobi Facebook page. Our good friend Tommy Mack from Geeks Helping Geeks. He writes in and says, "I knew A New Hope when it was just Star Wars. I was only 10 years old when I saw it in theater, and for me, and it was the moments that were probably considered cliche at this point, but nonetheless are the defining moments. The music, the opening crawl, the giant Star Destroyer, that went on and on forever. Darth Vader's grand entrance, that moment we first saw what a lightsaber was. The cantina and all those aliens, the Death Star trench run. I could go on and on. A New Hope to me is the definite Star Wars film, and surely the only one that stands alone. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. If they never made another film, it would still remain an all-time classic." Definitely, Tommy has some good points there. We talked about the beginning, middle, and the end, and it's a classic story of a hero's journey. And anybody can sit down and enjoy it and just pull, like you said, those classic moments out of that, and everything just kind of just rolls together. The music, obviously, introduction to the whole the Star Destroyer coming in, and those classic scenes. Everyone remembers that stuff because it was so new and so fresh and so exciting. So thank you very much.
Yeah, of course, Tommy is one of our great friends from Geeks Helping Geeks, and we're hoping that hint he will blog for us someday. So that would be awesome too. Thank you, my friend. Next comment comes again from our Facebook page, Audra Weiker, Weiker. Audra, I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. She said, "I first saw it when it came to theaters. I was 7 at the time. I remember seeing Darth Vader for the first time and thought he was a really cool bad guy for a science fiction story. Taking a line from The Empire Strikes Back, impressive, most impressive. The Star Destroyer was a pretty impressive ship. Seemed to go on forever. I remember watching the Death Star run near the end and thinking that was pretty cool, especially when Han Solo came back and helped out, so Luke could destroy it by using the Force to use the proton torpedo rather than the onboard computer. Princess Leia was to me a more let's do things my way kind of girl, rather than the classic damsel in distress type I thought she'd be. She was awesome. I loved all the characters in the film, and it would have worked as a standalone movie. I kind of gravitated more towards Han than Luke, ducking while those who love Luke lob a shoe in my head. And R2, I thought he was adorable as droids go, and the team of 3PO and R2 was pretty fun to watch. May the Force be with you. Well, thank you, Audra. I, too, agree with you. The Star Destroyer at the beginning, that is an iconic moment that still does not fail to give me goosebumps. It's a tremendously powerful scene that shows you right off the bat that you're seeing something different than you've ever seen before, and that still holds true today.
And how about that twist at the end? She mentions about Han Solo coming back and helping Luke out, and obviously saving the day. And I mean, it's you look back at that and don't realize that was a twist in the plot. In at that young age, you don't know. I mean, just like you're excited. You're in the movie. You're having a good time. And Audra definitely has some great moments here. Our last discussion email comes from Cody Lee, and Cody says, "When I think about A New Hope, the first image that comes to my mind is Luke watching the binary sunset on Tatooine. That moment, combined with the music, says everything about the movie for me. A young man who longs to see what awaits him away from home, who feels trapped and alone, who doesn't know exactly what he wants, just that is different than what he has. Such a relatable message about a young person's search to find their path. I have upset my wife during many romantic sunsets by staring off." That's hilarious. I'll try again here. "I have upset my wife during many romantic sunsets by staring off in the distance and humming Binary Sunset, a true story. Keep up the great work, Cody Lee." Cody, that's pretty funny there.
Tremendous.
And who hasn't done that, really? I mean, come on. That's a great memory. Definitely playing on some of the great themes about New Hope. And the Binary Sunset, says it all, man. Good job.
Our topic for show number 32 is Star Wars and relationships. What does Star Wars have to say about love and romance? What place does Star Wars have in your relationships? How important is it to you that your significant other likes Star Wars? Joining us on this topic are two very special guests, our wives. In 300 words or less, be sure to send us an email or MP3 with your thoughts, comments, questions, and opinions to feedback@coffeewithkenobi.com. Corey, this is a show that we've been talking about since we first chatted about this at a little Italian place when we first started talking about our podcast and kind of laying down things. And we're very excited about this. I think it's safe to say we're much more excited about it than our wives are. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say, yeah. Yeah, I think so. And, I kind of discussed with her earlier, and she's like, "Wait, do I have to talk? And is it live?" And she, it's so cute. It really is. I couldn't be more excited. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Oh, I agree.
We'll see how long they last, as far as throwing the towel in, as far as our craziness. But we're really looking forward to talking with them, getting their opinions on relationships and how it interacts with our relationships with them and our love life, I guess. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're a new hope for us because you know how Peter Parker was the kind of the nerd that ends up marrying the model.
There you go.
That's my story here.
That's Peter Parker and Star Wars.
A match made in heaven, as are our wives coming on the show. So be sure to tune in because we're going to have a great time with them.
I like the sound of that.
Echo 3 to Echo 7. Ano, buddy, do you read me?
I saw part of the message.
I seem to have found it.
Our first listener email comes from Chris Baca, and Chris has to say, "The hand Idiot's Array is from the old Lando books. They explain how the game of Sabacc is played. Also, this is the first mention of the game in canon. It was mentioned in the early version of the script of Empire Strikes Back. It's not in the film, but made the novelization." That's from Chris Baca. Extra piece of information there I didn't know. Certainly, I for some reason, I don't know if I remember hearing it in Empire Strikes Back, Han talking to Lando. Maybe it wasn't mentioned.
He says, "Hey, you lost her to me fair and square."
Yeah, he lost her to me fair and square, and maybe they don't say the reason or the way why, but
I think it is. He says in the novels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
the novelization.
Right. I remember that, and that was one of those things where it's always been around, and we've known it, but we haven't known it.
Right.
It's like the Sith thing. The
Sure.
term Sith isn't mentioned, in the original films, but it's something we've always known about. And for me, I remember that from the Star Wars picture book that came out, that they had one for all the films. So that was fun. Chris also sent something about the Kenner. And when we got this, it was after our show with Mark was out, but he said he grew up with all the Kenner figures, and he recently sold his complete Death Star tower. I really love that playset. Too bad they never re-released it for the new figures. I like the old figures better than these new, overly articulated, overly priced figures from today. And so, yeah, Chris, we had a lot of fun interacting with one another. He's always been somebody that we can count on for awesome opinions and thought-provoking comments. So, interesting. When I heard that he sold his Death Star, if I'd have known that, I would have tried to buy it because mine is incomplete. I love that collectible.
Yeah, it's. I think it's hard to part with things like that, especially with stuff that's dear to your heart.
Our next email is from Victoria B. from geekingoutgirly.wordpress.com, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But she writes, "Dear Coffee with Kenobi, I apologize for the poor writing you're about to read, and I hope you'll forgive me for all the errors. I'm writing concerning the latest Rebels reactions. I've heard many people say that Ezra training through forming attachments is radical, and how it differs so greatly from Jedi training. When you spoke about how Yoda had changed and wanted Ezra to listen to his heart, I felt like I could finally pinpoint why I feel like this notion was off. When I was young, I watched the movie Pocahontas, and as you were speaking, I recalled a specific part of the movie where Pocahontas stops and listens to her heart. The same thing Yoda sort of advises Ezra to do is to discover the truth behind his actions. In the movie Pocahontas, they use the same ability to open up to others and even bridge the misunderstanding between two groups of people. I feel like that is the core of my issue with people who claim that Ezra's teachings are different from the Jedi teaching. Perhaps the Clone Wars Jedi Order wouldn't fully understand it, but Jedi are supposed to play the role of bridge maker to bring understanding, advising others, and defend them. This requires a basic connection, attachment to others to open yourself to their way of thinking and ideas. Ezra's training is about learning to open up to others after his years of living on his own, with his emotional and mental self locked away to protect himself from possessing losses. Learning to listen to his heart, or rather the Force, and feel what connections are out there and make those attachments is what Kanan is trying to teach Ezra. In truth, this is what was taught to him and so on. The Clone Wars might have made many Jedi close themselves off in their high towers and Jedi duties, but the core of what the Jedi were about were still there. They merely need to open themselves up and form the basic connections of compassion and empathy with others. Also, I've heard this on another podcast. The whole point of following this group on Lothal, this backwater outer rim planet, is because they are a single thread in a larger tapestry. Something is going to happen here on Lothal that brings these various factions of rebellions or groups together. In the trivia section for this episode, they hinted at it. Again, and Rebels Recon said that Kyber crystals have a presence on Lothal. This, along with the rapid land grabs by the Empire, whatever Sabine and Ezra are working on, and other things hint at a greater thing than just acting like simple terrorists. I'm sorry, I know you've never truly brought this up, but I feel like adding my opinion on this topic somewhere before I started screaming. Well, Victoria, no need to scream. This is certainly why we're here. We love having everybody write in and give their thoughts and comments. You have a sounding board here at Coffee with Kenobi, and you bring up some very interesting things. And I agree with you. I think that Kanan and Ezra, their Force concept and the notion of the Jedi, they're, as we've said, they're at the heart of what the Jedi Order should be or what it is designed as. And I love your comparison of the Jedis from the Clone Wars and their giant, basically, she didn't say ivory tower, but that's basically what is in their higher tower looking down. They needed to learn more empathy. And it was very well said, Victoria. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I relate this back to Qui-Gon Jinn and how he wanted to train Anakin, and the Jedi Council was opposed to that. So you even see that way back there where he was kind of seeing things a different light. We see it from Obi-Wan as well, the Clone Wars, where he kind of, sees things differently, just, going through adventures and being with Anakin. And then further still, we still see it with Yoda as he journeys by himself to kind of find himself, the dark self, and kind of have to repress that and just find a new way to be able to, defeat the dark side. And obviously Yoda's onto something, I think, in that. And also we see that further as we get into Rebels. after Order 66. Something went wrong. Something was devilishly wrong that Palpatine can get away with what he did, and he knew that. He knew the Jedi were kind of fooled themselves and doing things that not necessarily were right, maybe, and took advantage of that. So I guess it makes me think that you have some great points here, and I think all along though the Jedi were kind of on their way down, and there were certain factions, certain Jedi that maybe thought different ways, and we see that here with Ezra and Kanan, and we see that even in John Jackson Miller's book. How Kanan was not necessarily the what do you call it, the true Jedi, or not true Jedi, the classic Jedi, where he's kind of lost his way. He's kind of out of the order. There was no order. So he's training Ezra in this new way. Obviously, being prompted by Yoda, like we saw in one of the latest episodes, in a way, of a new way of training him. And we see that even further with Luke, how Yoda trains him, and even Obi-Wan, how he trains him. Just being cautious, look at what we did wrong. Look what happened to Anakin. We don't want this to happen again. Right. Let's change our method here. Maybe we can have attachments now. Maybe we can bring in love and learn from the heart. So I think that's what they're really trying to drive, I think, with this, the Rebels episodes and getting to know Ezra and Kanan. And I love the email. Thank you very much for writing in. I love hearing everybody's perspective. Look forward to future emails. Thank you.
Yeah, and as she said, it's really not the new ways. It's just more back in line of how things were supposed to be in the Clone Wars, just sort of subverted that. So really good stuff.
Our last email comes from Fraser Robertson. He asks, my question is, who do you think is the better franchise, Star Wars or Lord of the Rings? This is interesting because I've always been a Star Wars fan and never got into the Tolkien books. It wasn't until I tried to read The Hobbit. My dad, I think, read The Hobbit to me a little bit, trying to get into that world. And I've never been a huge fantasy guy. The world building thing really kind of threw me off. The different dialects, different, cultures and things. Really, I just didn't mesh with me very much. So I wasn't not a huge fantasy person. I mean, I've read some fantasy. I've never really read the Lord of the Rings books themselves. I've seen the movies. I've seen all the Hobbit movies. I've enjoyed them. I really do like them. And actually, the movies had prompted me to look more in the books some more and check those out. But for me, the better franchise is Star Wars.
I learned something new about you tonight.
Don't you always?
Yes, I do. I would say that if I had to weigh science fiction and fantasy, like sword and sorcery fantasy on the same level, overall, I would gravitate more towards the fantasy aspect of things.
Is that because of the storytelling?
I don't know. I just like the world better. I just like the different mythologies. I like science fiction, but I mostly like science fiction because of Star Wars. And I also, by the way, love the newer version of Battlestar Galactica. I think that's about as good as it gets for television. But that's I digress. We run a Star Wars podcast.
Yeah.
So obviously Star Wars is the top of our list. Now that is not to say I do not love Lord of the Rings, because I do love Lord of the Rings, particularly the original 3 films. The newer Hobbit films, not so much. And that's mostly because I teach The Hobbit and I know that book uncomfortably well, because I've read it probably 15 times, because every time I teach it, I read it again with my students so that I can be on top of things. So yeah, I love both, but Star Wars is Star Wars. Are you kidding? That's it. That's where.
Well, he phrases what's the better franchise. So
well, it's got to be Star Wars.
It's Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars is a franchise. Lord of the Rings has become a franchise within the last 10 to 15 years, I think, because of.
Well, to be fair, in the 60s, The Hobbit was
the cartoon.
If no, the book. If there was social media when The Hobbit came out, when Tolkien first wrote it, it would be huge. It would be.
Oh, it still is. I mean, it still is huge today.
Yeah, but I mean, it like people were writing things, all over the world on walls, saying Frodo was here or things like that. I mean, it was incredibly popular. So it's always had its following, and even when there was nothing to go on for longer than the Star Wars drought, we don't even know what a drought is compared to Tolkien fans. That's true. It wasn't until Peter Jackson came along that it became much more in the collective consciousness of people, the zeitgeist of the culture, if you will. So I love them both, but Star Wars is definitely the best. Yeah, it was a really cool question.
That was fun. A lot of fun to talk about.
Agreed.
Chewie, get us out of here!
If you would like to respond to our question of the show, have a comment, or just want to say hello, send us an email or MP3 at feedback@coffeewithkenobi.com. Or if you have a specific question or comment for either of us individually, email us at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com or coryc@coffeewithkenobi.com, or visit us at coffeewithkenobi.com and click on the Contact Us section, or comment on one of the stories featured on the site. If you enjoy the show, please write a review in iTunes or Stitcher. You can also like the show on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, as well as keep up to date at our Twitter feed at Coffee with Kenobi. You can also find us on Tumblr at coffeewithkenobi.tumblr.com. If you enjoy the jazz music, the album is Eye to Eye by Steve Torok.
Give the evacuation code signal.
That's it for show number 31 of Coffee with Kenobi. A big thank you to Scott Murray for sharing a cup of coffee with us and discussing Star Wars A New Hope. Be sure to check out Assembly of Geeks for the latest in geek news and commentary, as well as the Peggy Carter podcast, and be on the lookout for Scott's blogs here at Coffee with Kenobi.
Thanks to Rob at the Bearded Trio, our in-studio guest Scott Nafziger, and to everyone who contributed to this show, and to all of you out there who listen to and email Coffee with Kenobi each and every week. Don't forget to send us your comments, questions, and opinions on the topic for show number 32, Star Wars and Relationships.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
There's no one here. Move along.